My name is Cecily McLeod, and I'm the chair of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta Young Leaders. We want to welcome you here, and we want to thank you for coming to our briefing on social entrepreneurship beyond TOMS. I want to introduce you to a couple of our board members, and then we will get started. And also thank you to our speakers for being here. We're so excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much. If you will look in your materials, you have lots of information about the World Affairs Council of Atlanta and the young leaders, and I invite you and ask you to look that over. I will not go through and read that for you now, but I really do invite you to read that over. We have a lot of great events coming up. But without further ado, I'm going to throw it to our marketing co-chairs, Udi and Brandy, to let you know how to tweet and Instagram about today's event. And then we will have our co-chair of programming, Sarah Ford, who planned this event today, come up and welcome you properly and introduce you to our speakers. Again, thank you for coming.
Good evening, everyone. So nice to see all of you taking the time to attend this event. So at the back of your little handouts here, you have all our social media platforms, and we encourage you guys tonight to use the hashtag #BeyondToms to tweet about this event, start a dialogue online. We're really interactive, and we would really love to hear your perspectives, your thoughts, your questions. If tonight, for whatever reason, you weren't able to answer your question, we'd love to be able to dialogue with you online during the event as well as thereafter. Thank you so much.
Good evening. On behalf of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta's Young Leaders, I would like to welcome each of you to our first program of the season here at CARE USA. Taking a closer look at tonight at social entrepreneurship in Africa beyond a pair of TOMS. This program is also part of a citywide year of events called Africa Atlanta 2014. And with us tonight is the creator of Africa Atlanta 2014, Jacqueline Royster, and she's also the dean of the Ivan Allen College at Georgia Tech. With her is also the managing director of Africa Atlanta, Deshaun Jenkins. If you could stand up. Thank you for being with us tonight. We've worked very closely with him, also planning this event and other Africa Atlanta-related events. So we'd also like to recognize the ongoing sponsorship of the Young Leaders programs by the Coca-Cola Company and UPS. Lastly, we would like to recognize Dr. Cower's class of students from Oglethorpe University and representing us tonight, and as part of our future Young Leaders. So thank you for joining us. Tonight's discussion is not a criticism of the successful one-for-one TOMS business model, which has actually provided over 10 million pairs of shoes to individuals in developing countries since 2006. Rather, this evening, we're looking at a few of the many organizations working towards country-led solutions for sustainable and effective development in Africa and beyond. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists tonight, and for more information, please reference your programs. But first, we have Bernard Taylor, who happens to be on the board of our World Affairs Council of Atlanta, and he's also a partner at Alston and Bird. More importantly, he will be telling us a bit more of his work as chair of the Southeastern Regional Board's U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Next, we have DERRECK KAYONGO, who is founder of the Global Soap Project, which has distribution operations in over 32 countries. He was also chosen as a CNN Top 10 Hero of the Year in 2011. Lastly, we have NELL DIALLO, who is Vice President of Corporate and International Relations at MedShare, which has collected and distributed over $100 million of medical supplies to over 95 countries. Her work in this field has been recognized on numerous occasions by many organizations. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Mr. Taylor.
Okay, yeah, is this on now? Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. And we've only got a little bit of time, so we're going to jump right into it. So let me set a little background. I was just on the continent, African continent, and just returned last week. And while I was there, it was kind of a very interesting period of time because of the summit that was going on here at the White House, and there was a lot of discussion over there about the summit that was going on here, and there was a lot of positive comments and, quite frankly, a lot of negative comments also. So it was an interesting time to be there. But one of the issues that I was reading a lot of the newspapers there, and in one of the newspapers, one of the commentators stated the following. He said that Africa today is the beautiful bride of the global community. And when you think about that, and let me flesh out a couple of points that may support that conclusion. The African Development Bank and the World Bank report that Africa is home to 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world. And that for the first time in 5 decades, foreign direct investment in Africa at about 50 billion with a B a year rivals foreign aid on that continent. Can you believe that? You never would have thought that for Africa. And the Mo Ibrahim Foundation reports that between 2010 and 2017, Africa will likely record a 70% increase in the exploration of 15 precious minerals by the rest of the world, compared to a 30% increase in Asia and in the Americas. So, and there are all other kinds of points, and many of those we'll probably talk about tonight, that support that particular statement that Africa is the beautiful bride of the global economy. But there are some formidable hurdles and challenges. And I won't go through all of those, but just a couple of examples. On the continent of Africa, and NELL, I'm certain you can relate to this, 3% of the global health workforce is there to provide health care for the people there on the continent. But 24% of the global burden of diseases occur on the continent. And that the unemployment rate in some African countries is more than 50%. Some real challenges. And those are just a few of the issues. So with that background, let's get into It's More Than TOMS, all right? For our panelists, let me ask Derek, you've heard his background. You know, when you think about the TOMS experience and other experiences like that, and folks refer to it as social entrepreneurship, can you tell us first what you think social entrepreneurship is all about? And secondly, how you think it's working in Africa, how you think it should work in Africa, and how your organization is addressing those issues.
Wow, that's a loaded, loaded question. Anything to do with Africa is always loaded.
Yeah.
But let me first say that it's such a delight to be here, and mainly because I think that in this kind of dialogue, we get a chance to sort of unveil some of the things that are out there that are wonderful. Social entrepreneurship, what does that mean to me? Personally, I think entrepreneurship is really just business. It's getting an idea that is innovative, that can occupy a space that is not being occupied right at that point. But then that when you add a social aspect to it, that what you are doing is you're saying, how does it become relevant in society? Are you just making money, or are you also making money plus also balancing the needs of the community? In other words, can you as an entrepreneur come into a community that needs the product, but also leave the product in a way that everybody says, wow, I like those shoes, or I like that soap. Why? Because it helps me. I'll give you an example. As a former refugee, when we were given food, it had USAID on it. I thought USAID was a product. I wanted to eat USAID food. Why? Because I associated that with provision. So I think that when you are doing social entrepreneurship, that's what you're thinking about. How does that become relevant then, therefore, in the other 3 parts? What am I doing and how is that helpful? Number 1, the Global Soap Project, the whole idea is not to bring soap into Africa to become a problem of fighting with other industries that are providing soap in Africa. It is to specifically go to those areas where soap is needed. There's soap in Africa. There's nobody who doubts that. Mm-hmm. But is there places where people who make what we call the bottom billion, who make $1 a day, who can't actually take 25 cents to buy a bar of soap because they have other responsibilities? Mm-hmm. Can they actually get soap? That's one thing we're looking at. Number 2, we're looking at challenging this idea of partnerships. You know, how are you going to beg for soap from Unilever or Procter & Gamble or anybody else every single time you have a crisis? Is that even sustainable? So what we're saying is we can work with all these people, the Center for Disease Control, everybody, and become their soap bank, if you want to put it that way, when there's a crisis, like the one we saw in Haiti where there was a big thing. Lastly, where's social entrepreneurship in Africa right now? If you want to make money quickly, go to Africa right now.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Well, Nell, what do you think about that? Social entrepreneurship and making money in Africa right now? No, I mean the first question.
I agree with everything you said. Number one, I think that social entrepreneurship is just profits with a purpose. So what we do at MedShare, and I'll explain that a bit before I get into some examples of what's happening in Africa. If you can imagine, it's estimated that $6 billion worth of medical supplies and equipment go into trash in America annually. A large portion of that is brand new, never been touched by a doctor or nurse. And I will give you an example of how that could occur. If you go into a hospital to do surgery on your little finger, they're going to lay out everything they need for the surgery, plus everything they would need if you have a heart attack. Let's say that they lay out 30 items. At the end of the surgery, maybe it wasn't complicated, so they used 10. The other 20, the hospital is saying, well, what do I do with this? Because U.S. regulations require that I use them on this person. They were not needed, so I can't use them on someone else. They go in the trash. We have a partnership with 34 hospitals here in the Atlanta area, another 70 around the country where we have a base in San Francisco and New York. And we pick up those items that are brand new. We bring them to a facility and have 15,000 volunteers a year who help us to sort them into medical categories. And those categories are broken down to boxes of individual items. What is so important about MedShare, and if you haven't read it, I lived in Africa 15 years, still have a home in Ouagadougou. If you want to know where it is, we can talk about it afterwards. I saw the dumping when I was living there of so many products that came to Africa that could not be used. Many of them were sent by well-meaning people, but they didn't ask the Africans what they needed. So we have an online inventory open exclusively for doctors and nurses to order what they need. And we don't ship anything that's going to expire within 1 year. We also provide biomedical equipment and biomedical training. This is another area where dumping has been excessive in Africa. The World Health Organization has estimated that up to 60% of all equipment donated sits idle because nobody knows how to operate it. So what we do is we train technicians, and we also train end users, doctors and nurses. So the beauty of MedShare is picking up what would be waste here and making that a treasury for other people to be able to save lives. And is there anyone here from Coca-Cola? Thank you. Coca-Cola is our largest funder, and I just want to do a shout out because they just gave us an additional $200,000 for Ebola. Now, this is a crisis area that he spoke about, but I want to also tie it to TOMS. We ship to northern Kenya. In northern Kenya, people live in twig houses. The children have no shoes. They have no clothes. So bringing some TOMS shoes there keeps them from getting a disease called jiggers. And these jiggers eat up the toes of the children. So the point I'm trying to make is this. There's a place for TOMS, and there's a place for the other activities around enterprise. I agree with Derek wholeheartedly. We are late in America, and I was very happy to see the summit in Washington. We're about 10 years after China, where the largest summit took place ever with regard to heads of states concerned about the continent. Perhaps we'll catch up, but Africa is the new Mecca. And so making money, just consider any category. For example, there are people taking it to a social enterprise. There are people growing rice in Africa. They are growing cocoa, and many of them are independent farmers. They don't have a way to transport their product to the market. So the big boys come in, or the big girls, and buy it at unfair prices. Imagine with your MBAs and the other A's, etc. You go into Africa and you take a couple of those farms and you market those things to people maybe right there in Africa. I don't know if you've seen this new situation in Ethiopia, where a young woman from Ethiopia studied here. She went back home because every year she would hear about so much production of agricultural product and other things that should have been feeding everybody, but they weren't. And it was because the South didn't know what the North was doing, et cetera. So she set up this mechanism that's now being studied by World Bank and others on how do you take product just from one part of a country in Africa to another. This is an example of where the money can be made. If you will walk around at the High Museum and you see some of the objects of art that are sold at triple, duple, 100% above what they are produced for. It's a billionaire market, but the people who are producing the product don't have the volume to sell. They don't have the marketing, etc. I cannot think of any category of work that you cannot make money in terms of Africa and still serve a social purpose. It's very easy. The other one is, where do I get the money for the startup? An example, there are 150 U.S.-owned multinationals operating on the continent. Western Union and MoneyGram made $8 billion on Black Africa last year. $3 billion came from Nigeria. You probably got an uncle or a brother or somebody working at Western Union. Go in, make a pitch through their foundation for an NGO that was set up to do some kind of business and get the funding from them. NGOs, you can get funding to pay your salary, your program operations, etc. Still make money and help somebody.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As you can see, DERRECK and NELL have a strong and rich foundation in Africa, and in trying to do the kinds of things, accomplish the kinds of goals that I think many folks believe you need to accomplish, and that is to make sure that whatever product, whatever opportunity you bring to the country, that you make sure that you figure out what the folks need and get them involved and make sure that they profit from that venture and their lives are improved from that venture. But let's talk about a few of the challenges. During the Leaders Summit, Investing in the Next Generation, the summit that was at the White House, a lot of folks showed up. But Sudan's Omar el-Bashir wasn't there. Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe wasn't there. Eritrea's leader wasn't there. Catherine Samba-Panza from the Central African Republic wasn't there. And the White House has gotten some criticism because, and from Human Rights Watch in particular, because the contention is that, yes, we can focus on trade and we can focus on security issues in regards to trying to improve the situation in Africa, but we got to deal with the real-life nitty-gritty issues also. Let's talk about how those challenges impact the ability to provide better opportunities and more opportunities for Africans to realize their futures.
Well, I think that, and I work for Amnesty International, so I'm going to come out of the hatchet here and say, if you hear me speak very, very much on the side of human rights, it's because of that. It's very hard to do anything in life when you're oppressed. Let's agree with that. Whether it be through social strata, or whether it be to access education, or whether it be legal systems in place. When somebody offends you or does something that is derogatory against your name, where do you go? It's very, very hard to do that. And I think that African leaders, even though they are open to anything else, that's the one area they really need to understand. Money is not good with violence around it. It just doesn't do well. So in other words, if you lend me money and I say to you, well, my brother is the president of X, Y, and Z, I'm not going to pay you, what is the chances that you're going to lend me money again? Or if I lend you money and then there's no electricity for you to implement your programs, and then you tell me every time, well, where's the profit? And I tell you, well, there's no power, there's no this. Those institutional structures that you need to govern a nation have to be solid. They have to be solid. Governance is one of them. You can't have policies that are anti-trade or anti-gender or anti-tribe or anything like that and expect development to happen. It will happen, but it will happen in a crippled way. It's like the Piazza Tower, it's bent, And so I think that human rights have a bad sort of connotation to anybody who's doing business because it means they have to open up their books or something, which is fine. But let's call it something else. Let us call it social justice. Okay? Mm-hmm. Can you as a business and as a country and as a governing body create an environment, or as the French say, a milieu, in which business can do very well? Meaning that a regular person who doesn't have a brother in government or a sister in whose family, can they actually emerge and do their business honestly and not have to fester with corruption and all these other things? That's the question here. I think that at the end of the day, whoever this person is who is in charge of any government in the world, they need to understand that there's something to be said about developing the structures that are needed for business to do well. And one of them is legal instruments. If somebody corrupts around particular things that have to do with business and you cast a lawsuit and you get a judgment by the judge that says you got to go to jail, you got to pay a penalty, and somebody gets off scot-free, I'm out.
Well,
Go ahead.
I guess I have a little bit of a different twist on this. I lived in Burkina Faso, and during the period I lived there were at least 2 coups d'etats. How do you know when there's a coup in most countries in Africa and formerly Latin America and South America? You hear military music on the radio. You may hear some guns firing here and there. Life continues. You still got to eat. You still have to have clothing. You still have to move around. And there may be some controls, but the economy does not stop. I was told that during the 14-year war in Liberia, Coca-Cola stopped making bottling their Coke there for 1 week. So, of course, everybody wants law and order. But a lot of times, the time to really make money, if you have personal security, is when the greatest need is there. And so you should not dismiss it because maybe the president has an evaluation by several nations in the world that he is a corrupt figure. MedShare is apolitical, a-religious. Zimbabwe is one of the fast-growing economies. So if we wait until Mugabe, he's in his 80s and, looks great, until Mugabe is gone, before maybe we introduce a small business in Zimbabwe, I would say that's not the way to go. Because you have a legal system in Zimbabwe, and that legal system permits you to open a company in the same manner that you do here. And you would be shocked at how many law firms here are representing governments in Africa to help them with various problems. Now, the 4 presidents who didn't come to the White House, I disagree. Because the development, no matter where it's coming from or where it's going, it has to go through the government structure. If you're a Catholic hospital or clinic operating in any country in Africa, you come under the umbrella of the Ministry of Health. And this is one of the big fallacies with regard to how we regard developing countries. They are poor, they are unorganized, they don't know what to do. Well, come in and try to do something without following the rule of law. We have this all the time with MedShare. One of the things that we require, 3 as a matter of fact, application, that we vet the institution that's going to receive the product. Number 2, a sponsorship donation. But more importantly, we have what we require as a duty-free letter from the Ministry of Finance. That means that if you're a hospital in that country, you have to be registered as a nonprofit. There's no country in the world, no matter what the leadership is, that does not have this system. So you go to that office and you get registered and you bring that letter to us. Otherwise, we will not load the container. You've heard tales about missing containers. If a container is missing, believe you me, you consigned it to a crook. The government is not picking up containers. But if you have the power to choose the consignee. And so if you choose the wrong person, they can come pick up the container with the receipt that they received from the shippers here. I think there's another thing that's going on in Africa that we don't think about. Just like we want everything to change in Africa towards the best, there's major pressure in every country in Africa for change. I hosted yesterday the president of the National Bar Association of Nigeria. It's a woman. And that bar association is doing the same thing as the American Bar Association, raising questions around policy, raising questions around human rights. They are doing the same thing. So these countries are changing, but you don't have to wait until that time. You can choose between the ones you want to go in and work in, and you can actually do work here that affects things there. But I would have included the other 4 presidents, because right now, what are they thinking? If you go to Zimbabwe and you're an American and you want to install yourself there, and maybe you have to go through the rules and regulations, and the people think that they were excluded because they think that there are going to be programs that will come to affect them, how do you get around that? So I think that it's not all in one corner and not in the other. One of the things that has been demonstrated very well now is the fact that Africa can move along actually with a lot less help than they have ever gotten from America. One of the things is China has led the way, and what has happened behind China? You have Russia, you have India, and one of the very interesting ones is Turkey. Turkey has no money, but Turkey has enough to build prep schools and higher education institutions in countries around Africa. Now, when I say they don't have any money, it's relative, and I'm comparing it to, China. But I'm saying that once China moved in, the other countries said, okay, we can make money, we can be partners, we can figure a way. Do you know that the interest rate on soft loans at the World Bank went down after China went into Africa? That's significant. That's very significant. So we have to play the same field as the rest of the world. And China is not going into Africa saying, did you vote for me at the World Bank? At the UN? They are looking a lot at purely economics. And I think when you keep it in that arena and you're not in the country trying to tell them how to run their politics, you're going to move forward in a much better way than judging. And I think that's one of the lessons that's being learned with the international foreign policy in America.
Let me create some controversy here.
Yes.
Okay.
Please, let's have some controversy.
Are you saying that what the Chinese are doing on sub-Saharan Africa is the appropriate way to approach interacting with the people of that continent?
I'm saying that when you have no choice, let me give you an example. I lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Most of the roads in the Democratic Republic of Congo went a few blocks. If you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo today, you have roads going many, many places. What does that mean? If I'm sitting in Kivu and I want to go to Goma, and I have a product that I can take there, and there's no road, I can't do any trading in my own country. So these countries, many of them were penalized because of their politics. So do you leave them in that category, or do you choose another route where you can maybe get a road? And if China comes in and builds that road, one thing's for sure. If the president is corrupt and is getting a kickback, he cannot steal a road.
All right, Derek, you heard that? You agree with that?
I'll take one, and then I think we have, everybody wants to talk now. I can see hands up.
We make it to the
Yeah,
Q&A
go on.
earlier here.
I'll just say one thing. I'll just say one thing about this. I see where NELL is coming from, that we should ignore the politics itself and let the other things sort of work their magic. And yeah, when you build a road, you do create commerce and all that stuff. But I think the question at hand is, how do you want the continent to grow? It can grow in a crippled fashion, as I said, the Piazza's tower, and that's going to load up the continent in a way that is not going to give them what they really are looking for. Because what are they looking for? I'm Ugandan American now. I like the fact that my son's school functions. I really like the fact that the power is on. I really love the fact that when somebody happens to him, they give me a call and say, come get your son, something is wrong. I mean, there's so many small things that we take for granted that affect and defect the work that needs to be done so that you create a foundation in which everything is bent. So that's the only fear I have. I don't have a problem with Chinese or any other money coming into Africa to give us money. I don't have a problem with that. But what I have a problem with is, how do you cater to the innocence of people's freedoms? I mean, I'm telling you, freedom is a very, very important thing in innovation, in freedom of expression, in all these things. Google would never have made it in Idi Amin's time. Never. Absolutely not. Yahoo? Are you kidding me? I mean, there's no way. So my fear is that there are so many creative Africans out there like myself who want to do amazing things. We are so smart. I can guarantee you we are so, so smart. My brother-in-law is now a medical doctor at Johns Hopkins. Surgery. The best student in Johns Hopkins recently was a Nigerian kid. But the idea of him going back home and getting bottlenecked with that creativity is just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. So I'm just saying here in conclusion that Africa's potential cannot be seen as a desperation of potential. Oh, the Chinese are giving us money, so you're smart, very good for you, but we're getting a road here, or we're getting a hospital here and there. We want real development, solid development, not by-the-way development. That's my only fear. But I do take Nelly's point.
Make one comment.
Go ahead now.
I'm sorry for
In
creating
order to have that school or whatever you need, and this is not all in one bucket and all not in the other. You must have foreign direct investment. And that has been the problem for Africa. If you go to most leaders in Africa at different levels and at the top, they know there's not a country in Africa that doesn't have a 20-year plan for development. They know what they want to do. The ones who are good have taken whatever they had and moved with it. Botswana, and there are many others. But if you cannot get the foreign direct investment from what you consider to be your Western friends for many, many years, you have to look to where you can get the foreign direct investment. Now, maybe out of the summit will come some innovative ways that more foreign direct investment will go to Africa. And in any situation, follow the money. Follow the money. And that's what Africa needs. If you want to build, we just worked with the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. That's the equivalency of the Washington, D.C. The minister there is trying to develop primary care clinics. MedShare comes in because we can offset the budget by bringing in these things so they save money. But they know how many clinics they need over the next 10 years to help the population. But they don't have the foreign direct investment, and they're not generating enough with the activities where it is now to be able to do that. Niger, they just got oil. They're pumping 20,000 barrels a day. Their domestic consumption is 7,000 barrels a day. They don't have the money to build storage for the oil. They don't have money to take the trucks with the oil to the nearest port. They are landlocked. So they came up with a creative way, sell it to Nigeria. They border with Nigeria. So it's a creative solution, but the long term, they're looking for taking it themselves to the port, putting it on a tanker and sending it where it needs to go.
Go right ahead there.
Now I'm going to give it to the floor because I think we have a lot of people that are.
Can we get to that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
I have a question. First, I really loved your organization. We talked about it in our MBA program a lot last year because it's phenomenal what you've done.
You're very kind.
It is impressive. And I'm wondering, there is a big problem with a lot of African nations right now with brain drain, like you're talking about. And this is a problem in a lot of developing countries that the brains that are really innovative and talented, the intelligence is leaving and not going back. So I believe that there's a lot of development that can be had in African countries, but I worry that it's just colonialism all over again when you have so many foreign companies and foreign interests coming in to develop. And so do you have ideas around encouraging more internal development and encouraging development of talent? I guess maybe country to country. I know you're from Uganda, and there are some really smart people coming out of Uganda, for sure.
I think that what I've told my friends back at home is to stop complaining and waiting for is that me? And waiting for somebody else to come and do whatever they have to do. When I started the Global Soap Project, it was out of desperation. You know, I could not imagine that the US threw away 800 million bars of soap every year. I just couldn't get it. The bottles, 1 billion, close to 1 billion bottles, shampoo, conditioner, and lotion. And I said, what can we do with this? But that's where Jefferson comes in. That's where Thomas, Jefferson, Adam, Smith comes in, and all the other people that we studied in school. I was like, if they can do all this stuff, Benjamin Franklin had like, how many patents? I mean, I don't know that somebody came up to him and said, well, Benjamin, he just said, okay, there's a problem here, let me fix it. The first thing is, just don't worry about all the stuff that we've talked about, with the politics and all that. Just get in there and fix the problem, because we're trained to do that. Number two, and the last point, was that I never feared this idea of going to the Hilton to ask for money. I went to the Hilton and asked for $1.3 million. I didn't even have a business plan. What do you think they did to me? They were like, what? But you know what? I gave them a good reason to give me the money. And I said to them, when you look at how much you throw away, they weigh that trash, isn't it? So how do they haul it out? By weight. How much soap are you throwing away and how heavy is it? And if we took it out of the trash and extracted it and calculated the value, because it still has value, even though it's trash, it has some kind of value in accounting. So what are we looking at? So I said, if you give me the money, you can write it off. I'm a 501c3. I gave them all the reasons they needed to hear to get invested in the whole project. So I never feared to get in there. But number three, I networked. I really figured out who can help me. And most of you who know me here in Atlanta know that I'm a ferocious networker. You know, from the guy who's a janitor to the guy who's a CEO to the lady that is in charge of MedShare took my first soap.
And also, I helped him to find his first warehouse.
Exactly.
And his first consultant.
So networking.
Right.
So I never complained. I always looked at the problem, did my ideation and my organizational thought, and went in there and did the work. I picked up soap after I worked at CARE every day at 6 p.m. in the hotels all around Atlanta. I sold my BMW and bought a Ford pickup. I mean, there's sacrifice here. I had a backache for a whole year. Seriously. And that the whole time, my son was making fun of me doing the American thing or the Western thing. Ew, yak, because he didn't see the final product. So that's what I did. Don't worry about everything else. Focus on you, your vision, your mission, and be like a dog. Just go out there and fight for it.
I want to talk about the brain drain. That's being reversed. It's not reversed at the degree that we all would love, but it's being reversed. Just take a trip to Accra and go around and visit the healthcare centers there and see how many medical doctors have built small hospitals and clinics who were working in hospitals in America. Also, most governments have policies on the brain drain. And one of the things that many of them are doing is building houses for doctors. They want to decentralize medicine. They have inherited the colonial system, which was to have big hospitals in a few places and no rural clinics, or very few. So in order to get a doctor to leave the capital or to come back from Atlanta to go and work in the rural areas, it's the same problems that you would have if you were going to work in South Georgia. You want to go to the mall, you want to do this, you want to do that, and those things are not available, but you can create certain incentives to be able to do it. One pet project that I had in northern, with my husband and some friends, in northern Burkina Faso. This was a place that did not have one surgeon. But the government of Burkina said, we will give you a surgeon if he has somewhere to stay. So we sensitized the community and the mayor of that town, and we found a place for the surgeon to stay, do a fundraiser. The temperature there is about 110 degrees. So we raised money to put an air conditioner in the surgeon's house. And then we sensitized the community. So this surgeon, after 2 years, didn't want to leave. Because the people did not have money, but they brought him sheep, chickens, and everything else that would make him happy to be there. The brain drain is an active activity with the developing world. It's not just, okay, let me go to America. There are certain incentives around brain drain, and if you don't have any income, and you have 2 or 3 children, and you come to study here, and you get out and you get a job that's going to be able to help you to feed 50 people, you're going to make the decision to stay here. Now, aid. If you compare aid and remittances in Africa,
That's right.
this is where people live in Africa on remittances.
That's right.
So every single person who has a job in Africa, unless they are unusual, they have a responsibility to help the rest of the community. So there are a lot of factors around brain drain that are not just associated with, I don't want to go back.
But
And
I
it's
also, I also
ahead,
want to
but-
say that my wife and I separated in an interesting way. She worked in the US for 20 years and finally got the skill set to go back home. She now lives, she's the CEO of DHL Malawi right now. So we do have the brain drain, what we call brain drain, but it's temporary for most of us. We stay here for 15 years, 10 years, and they call it brain drain. But some of us go back. We really go back. And if we don't go back, we send expertise. We go back home and build homes and do all that stuff. We're going to retire back home is what the plan is.
Yeah.
You know, so we're brain draining. But all my Indian friends, all my friends from the Middle East, they end up going back home and doing business projects and all that stuff. So it's brain drain for now, but later on it becomes brain return.
And two points in regards to the remittances issue. I mean, the World Bank right now estimates that going back to Africa, there's about $60 billion.
Yeah.
But they think that's a gross underestimate.
Yeah.
They think it's really more about $180 billion going back in remittances back to various countries in Africa. And let me tell one quick story dealing with the issue of brain drain and the issue of the need to survive and to do well. You go to various schools in Africa, and you look at those children sitting on those benches with their little desks,
No books.
6 to 8 of them at a bench and all that. And those kids have, this thirst to
Right.
learn, and they are going to learn, and they are going to eat our children's lunch if our
Right.
children don't get their act together.
Right.
And just last week, I was in a refugee center in the Gambela region of Ethiopia, and there were South Sudanese refugees there, and they were just coming in with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And there was this beautiful, I told you about this, this beautiful, about 16-year-old Sudanese boy. And he was standing there alone in the middle, a tall, beautiful kid. And I walked up to him and said, "How you doing?" And he said, "I'm gonna be okay." And he looked at me again and he said, looked in my eyes and said, "I'm gonna be okay." In many countries, 50 to 60% of the population is under 18 years old in Africa. And those kids have a thirst to learn, and I think given the opportunity, they will be okay, and they will make a difference on their continent. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
In the back, I think there was a question.
Okay, I'll stop pointing to you. You go ahead.
Yes, sir. Could you stand up, please?
So I've worked in sub-Saharan Africa. I've been there for 25 years. I worked in Lesotho, Botswana, Malawi, so I've been to a lot of these countries in water and sanitation.
Yeah.
To your question, madam, on China getting ahead in Africa, one of the things is I've seen a change in policy in African governments, which is quality instead of quantity, right? So a lot of these governments in sub-Saharan Africa, I can talk mainly because water and sanitation, World Bank projects, UN projects, even in healthcare. It was all the quality that was coming from China was not up to par.
Right.
Right? So people were dying because the quality that was coming in was not great, right? So I think American companies should, or anyone thinking about going to Africa and doing business, should always think about not just going in there and just building a product, but actually building a quality product, or doing something that's actually really valuable to the community. Another point that I want to say is a lot of African governments are not there when you talk to them and you say, "I want to do something social because I've tried this a couple of times. I want to do something for the community, not just open a school, but I'm talking about, actually help in the rural area," because I grew up in Africa. So I really, I want to help the guys that I went to school with, or the Catholic school that I studied in. And what I hear back again is, "Man, I don't want a handout. We don't, like in that day, we don't want a handout." I'm like, "Why, man?" And then she's like, because we don't want to feel like, we don't want to feel like we're getting aid. We want to feel like we're doing it by ourselves. So if you start something, employ our people, employ my students, and then do something. So I think really starting at the grassroots level where we're showing the governments that we're actually a part of the community and not actually giving handouts might also be a way of infiltrating into these communities and actually making a difference.
One of the things that's happening in Ghana and a few other countries, if you want to open a business and you open it with a Ghanaian, your cost of opening a business is very low. If you're coming in on your own, the cost is much higher. And that's to encourage the growth of small and medium-sized businesses, but with the Ghanaians moving up at the same time. You can find this throughout Africa. I wanted to talk about the remittances and the $50-some billion. Every dollar, 9% of that dollar is paid to send the remittance back from most places in the world. The G8 summit last year said that they were going to work toward reducing that percentage to 5%. Now, most governments from the last 25, 30 years, they have exclusivities with Western Union, MoneyGram, and these companies. But there are governments now that are looking at taking away the exclusivities. One classic example is Ethiopia. There's a gentleman who lives right here in Atlanta. He has 38 different, I think it's 38 different centers in Ethiopia where people transfer money back to Ethiopia at a much lower rate than they would through the regular system. This is a huge business. That's an opportunity. And you can go, as I said, in any of these categories. Another one, we talked about the aid. The aid creates jobs and creates opportunities for business. Most of the aid companies the aid groups that are sitting in Africa, they need vehicles, they need food. I lived in Burkina, people didn't eat broccoli. But there were so many foreigners living in Burkina, somebody started growing broccoli and having it on the market there. And it's sold very well. So again, Africa is not ignorant about what they need and what they need to do. They are just having to choose partners at this time for the best interests of where they want to go. And it's not always beautiful. They have systems in some places where they've set up to do more governance on those foreign groups that are coming in. But many times their hands are tied because the multinationals also are very strong, and so it's going to take generations. Many of these countries became independent in the 60s and thereafter. You can't compare them with where America is now. I'm amazed sometimes when I go into countries and I see that things are working fairly well, in many cases very well, because they're having to deal with the modern world after this short period of time, and we have the expectations, that they're going to be at this level. It's going to take a lot of work, but I think that the energy there and the commitment is moving forward. The other big factor that I've learned, and I say to a lot of people, whatever the leadership is in Africa, we are not going to change it. So if you can find a way to work around where things are and try to stay in the legal track if you want to do business, it's going to work. And there's not one African country, no matter what state of affairs they are politically, economically, or in war, where you will not find people like yourself who have businesses and are doing things that are positive, et cetera, throughout the continent.
Gentleman on the second row, please, sir.
Todd Schimmelster, Kennesaw State. I wanted to kind of go back to what you had stated about getting connected to the people. Your first statement was from 2010 to 2017, there would be a 70% increase in exploration of 15 precious minerals. And you also referred to China as being, or Africa being the beautiful bride. I wish that she was viewed with that much respect.
Yeah.
Because when you look at it from a Chinese perspective, I don't think they're viewing her that way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's very opportunistic. There may be roads being put in place, but they are not for the people.
And they're falling
They're
apart.
bringing 10 to 20,000 of their own into the country to do whatever work they're trying to do. Basically take what they need and leave. And those roads don't have the infrastructure to be maintained. So my question, going back to what he had stated, how do you make that connection to those people who are intelligent, who are capable, but are subject to that system?
I just want to state that at the time that they are getting the money to build the road, tell me what was the alternative. That's where the problem is. It's about where you start and where you have to get in bed with whom to be able to accomplish X. And just like he said, the quality of the relationship with China and other folks are moving forward. I have my own organization. I've hosted 4 African presidents in Atlanta. One of them was the president of of Liberia, Sirleaf. And I wanted her to help with finding money to ship containers by helping us to get into the doors of Firestone Rubber. Firestone Rubber has been in Liberia more than 70 years. They have one of the biggest land masses in Liberia. So for me, if they've been there 70 years and they're shipping containers of rubber here and around the world, with the president, maybe I'll be able to put some medical supplies and equipment in the empty containers when they go back to pick up some more rubber. And maybe I will convince her that we put a corporate social responsibility clause in the next contract negotiations. So this formula can be carried out in many, many places. But you're going to find, just like the Fulton County Commissioner here right now, he has to negotiate. So you have to find those partners that you're going to work with until you're able to get it to the stage that you want it in. And that's where Africa
I warned you
is.
about controversy, right?
Right.
But let's be a little bit intellectual here. I know that this is sort of we're sort of washing over a lot of information, but it's important to be a little bit more depth-driven. The reason why the issue of China is a problem in Africa right now is that it's rooted in the fact that we didn't have anything, therefore whatever we give you is okay. And that's not a way to do things. Because what we're trying to show the continent is that you can do things that are robust and that have longevity and that can actually create sustainable change. Because this is where I talk about transformative leadership. It is going to be very, very important for the next 50 years for Africa to have transformative leaders. People who are not going to seek temporary solutions to their long-term problems. And I think that that person, that leader, is going to be the one that we're all looking for. So when I look at China, and I love China, it's great. I really love it. You know, I don't see that they understand what Africa really needs. They understand what their needs are, which is to do business as fast, as quickly as possible, because they consume a lot of energy. They're a fast-growing engine. They don't have Africanists, I think, somewhere in China that are saying, wait a minute, before you rush into Africa, let's do a better job than the Europeans did. We have a better chance here as Asia to show Africa and the rest of the world how you do this. They are missing such a wonderful opportunity. Where Europeans have failed, or the West has failed, the Chinese would have done remarkably well. That is the intellectual discussion we are having with them. And I think that if they understood the value of Africa's resources, they would not go in there with their industrial revolution, because this is an industrial revolution right now. They do not go in there and do the same mistake that were done before. So all I'm saying here is that I understand Africa and what it offers, and I'm telling you the bride, that bride will be fantastic for you. Why? Because the people will accept you. They will really, people are rioting now over China stuff. In Malawi, they had a big riot over China. The roads are dying, the machines are dying, everything is dying. So where is the robustness? So eventually Africans are going to say, anything that is Chinese I don't like. I like it when I'm poor, but when I get rich, I'm out. Is that where China wants to be? I don't think that's where China wants to be as well.
I don't think it's China. I think it's Africa that has to dictate how they're going to deal with partners. And they probably make 90% of the soap he's sending, because we import how much from China. But here's the situation. Here's the situation. In Africa, there's a rise in democracy. I have seen Africa 15 years ago and Africa today. Let's take an example. I work with a lot of governors from Nigeria. And one of the reasons why I work with them is because they have the budget that can pay for the shipments of the containers going to hospitals. They can pay for the engineer to go and train. They can pay for the pre and post assessment. They can pay for all the operations. However, many times before, there was not very much interest on the part of the governors. But today, the majority of people who vote in the 36 states in Nigeria are women. And these women are concerned about health and education. And the governors also have to compete in the elections. So what they are doing is trying to improve a lot of conditions publicly, like any politician would, to change things. It's a growing process. As democracy increases, so will the conditions. We're looking at some cities today in America where much will change as people vote more, the percentages increase. Africa is a continent in the process of developing. So there are going to be many, many things that we will have to see change. And I think the transformative leadership is just a matter of time. And there is some already.
So, excuse me, we have a question on the fourth row.
Oh, hi, my name is Eleanor Cheatham, and on the topic of social entrepreneurship, it begs the question in my mind, since when did asocial entrepreneurship become acceptable?
Wow. I think that, I don't know whether it was acceptable. I think it's made its way into our lubricant, language in business and business schools and all that stuff. But let's see whether it's acceptable to you in this way. When you have a product that is being thrown away like medical supplies or soap in the volumes that we're talking about, and you go and ask the question, to what end? And then you, on the other juxtaposition, are looking at 2 million kids dying every year because of diarrheal diseases, lack of childbed fever, 500,000 women, maternal health issues. And the issue is, do we have gloves for them, for the midwives to deliver the children safely? Do we have soap? Those issues are what causes us to think of social entrepreneurship. That if I go to a big corporation that is making soap and I ask them to give us soap to give to these people, they say, well, to what end? Because I got stakeholders or shareholders, whatever. The biggest thing I'm caring about is dividends. I don't care about social entrepreneurship. Forget it. In fact, just recently, have corporations understood corporate social responsibility. Why? Because you guys demanded it. They would have never come around that. So I think that the origin of social entrepreneurship is not a very new one, per se, because I think people have done it for a long time. But it has really taken hold as a respectable idea and concept just recently. I don't know whether it's 10 or 20 years, but Dr. Silverman probably has a sense of that.
We have another question
In the back.
in the back.
Yes, my name is Jerry Haywood, and I'm just curious to know what kind of offset programs are the African governments requiring of all these international companies that are flocking to Africa?
How do you mean
Offset in the terms of you're going there for this, but what are you giving except for monetary? What are you giving in return?
This is one of the major challenges in Africa. It's just now becoming a issue in terms of learning how to lobby and to use this doing business concept to develop the community. The government of Nigeria, some of the states, like Bayelsa, which is one of the 6 oil-rich states in Nigeria, they are trying to put a clause in their contracts with the oil companies to set aside 1% of their net profits for a development fund. The only country that I know that does that on a uniform basis is Vietnam. If you're doing business in Vietnam, you contribute to a fund for development. And you can go into some of the most remote areas of Vietnam and find brand new schools and clinics and various things because of this. But that's one of the, and maybe one of the companies that you could form is a consultancy to some of the governments to take this further distance by having demonstrated ways that these foreign companies that are operating there can contribute through their corporate social responsibility. The other thing about the social enterprises, one of the forces driving that now, and it's small, are the stakeholders in companies here. They are becoming more and more aware of the world, and they are also asking their profit-making companies where they have stock, etc., what are you doing socially in those areas? When Pfizer had a product in Nigeria that killed a lot of people, there was an outcry from some of the stockholders in Pfizer in America asking Pfizer, what are you doing? You know, what are you going to do thereafter? In Guinea, there's a Brazilian company called Vale. They taken out a mineral in one eastern part of Guinea, and something happened. The people in that community became very aware of the pollution, of the soil, etc., the diseases that their kids were getting because of the mining. So they did a protest. So when they did the protest, there was violence, and there were people who were killed. Now the Guinea government, because of that pressure from the population, has to deal with that company in a different way. That's a very bad example in terms of something bad happening, but some companies are looking at what they can do in advance of anything like that. And many of these communities have been displaced and affected because of the mining and other operations. So I believe that corporate social responsibility on the continent is just at its infancy, but it's going to grow.
And there's a lot of corporations out here that have social entrepreneurship, like Schwab Foundation, Ashoka, you know, some of you know that. They sponsor people back at home who have ideas. When I was in CNN Heroes, some of the kids that came in from Africa were really entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs. So it's being encouraged in that sense as well. But yeah.
Dr. Sosna.
Yeah, I'd like to comment, I think, briefly on the social entrepreneurship idea and what you're calling corporate social responsibility. Because corporate social responsibility is really a term that's lost its currency in many ways amongst corporations. As I understand it, the social entrepreneurship are people forming non-profits to do social good and, of course, sustaining themselves either through contributions or through the value that they're creating. But it's not a for-profit organization. But right here at home, with the Coca-Cola company is a great example that was started by Neville Isdell, the former chairman, and he called it connected capitalism. And what he said is basically that corporations are being forced and need to connect better with both their customers, the places they do business, their local, to look at their local impact, as well as with NGOs and with governments in order to take cognizance of the impact that they have. And Coca-Cola chose water as one of their major focuses because they said that's what is in the bottle. But I think the point has been made, and now Michael Porter at Harvard calls it shared value. The understanding that corporations, for-profit corporations, can't just look at dividends any longer because their constituencies won't allow it. And also, they feel, and I know Neville talked a lot about this, that if they want to hire the best and brightest employees, these people no longer want to leave their values at the door when they come to work. They want to know that their own values are the values of the company they work for. And so now Mukhtar Kent calls it a golden triangle of NGO, corporate and government collaboration. We call it actually at the council a rectangle because we bring in academia and feel that academia has an important role to play. And in fact, there is a lot of academic work that's been going on to introduce the idea into the business schools, just as Michael Porter has. So I do see that. I just have one other comment about the examples. I think you've given us a wonderful example of how China, where having done poorly, has actually been a catalyst for the world to get more focused and get their act together. So in that, from that aspect, I absolutely agree with you. The only problem is, and I think Derek has sort of nailed it, if these countries don't create the kind of climate that their own best and brightest want to work in and be innovative and creative in, they're not going to progress. And you can even see it in a country as advanced as South Africa, where I'm from, where their policies are increasingly becoming anti-business, or at least that's the perception. It's not their intention, but it's the way it's getting out. And that's going to discourage the very foreign investment. And the ministers, unfortunately, Nigeria is a very rich country, and the kind of Niger with its own oil could monetize it. The big problem is the amount that's been taken and siphoned off through corruption by the ministers going out of the country, whether it's to Switzerland or anywhere else. And I think governance still remains the biggest problem in Africa.
Can I say one?
Which is not to say you
No,
shouldn't do good,
right.
irrespective, I personally would be very loath to do a business enterprise in Zimbabwe, but I wouldn't stop or feel badly about a social enterprise going in to help the people, and that's very different.
And we have about 65 U.S. multinationals operating in Zimbabwe, U.S. owned. One other point I want to make aside from the corruption, most of the contracts with regard to the extractive market and others in Africa are unfavorable to the African governments. I just hosted the First Lady of Guinea. There has been a big controversy in Guinea because the new president said, look, we don't want to continue with the contracts we have. There's a contract with Alcoa. That contract has been existing probably 75, 80 years. The government gets about 8% on the contract. So when we're talking about all these billions, it's probably a little bit going to Luxembourg and some of the other places, but there's a lot of unfairness in these contracts. And so I think that that's another area where they're seeing this is where we can introduce more money to have foreign direct investment. Isdale, who was the head of Coca-Cola, he's now formed a company, ICT, and that company is working day and night to bring foreign direct investment to Africa. The former head of the Coca-Cola Africa Foundation is now the executive director of that company. So he is taking it a further step from the program that was when he was head of Coke. Now, if you follow World Economic Forum in Davos, there's a new concept on the horizon. It's called ethical capitalism. All corporate social responsibility, triangle, rectangular, whatever. The concept is if you are doing business in a country, you have a responsibility to help build that community. And we can call it whatever. And I think that that is the notion that is growing, not only from the African continent, but from us who have stakes in that continent working.
Excuse me, we're running a little bit low on time, so we have two more questions. Yeah. That's, here and then
Hi, I'm from the Georgia Tech Global Internship Program, and part of our mission at Georgia Tech is to develop global citizens, especially in the STEM area. And I'm really disappointed in my global internship program that over the past year we haven't had a single internship in sub-Saharan Africa. Do you have any tips or any ideas about how students can start preparing to take advantage of the opportunities that are available in sub-Saharan Africa? And thank you so much for this discussion. It's been really great.
You can get one of them to go work for my wife in Malawi if they're interested.
I'll give you my card.
But also we're smaller than all these other guys at Global SOP. But we have a young lady who is from Emory, who is doing public health there, and is in the DR I think right now studying how the impact of our SOP in the region. I think that the issue is for us to have a conversation and see what is out there. But there are so many corporations back at home. You don't have to focus on the ones that are here. They're already in Africa that would treasure that kind of interaction if you know how to actually seek them out. So don't look so much to American corporations per se. If you're trying to do a global citizenship kind of thing, really go and call them. They will actually be surprised that you call them. And you can work out details and it will work. Can I say one quick thing about this issue of sustainability that you're talking about? The way we're working at Global SOP is that we get some of our money through selling off some of the soap dough that we clean to India. And that money comes back into us and it helps sort of furnish or pay for some of our employees. So I think that part of our social entrepreneurship part was I didn't want to beg all the time, although I still beg. But I wanted to make sure that if something happened in the begging process, which I call fundraising.
I do too.
Because beggars are never choosers, so I like that part. But I also wanted to make sure that I showed people that you could actually turn an NGO that has a profit side to it. So that a new donor, in my view, would be the one that says, if I give you $1, what happens to the dollar? Or how are you balancing it with other things, other revenue income? So I think that's what we were able to do at Coca-Cola.
I would be happy to connect you with hundreds of people who are looking for internships, and I want to point out that Georgia Tech engineering students do work at MedShare on Saturdays for practical experience. And so we have a couple of people on staff also who have been interns in countries in Africa. And I have a lot of connections in various countries that people would welcome the internships.
I saw the MedShare job for Atlanta just last week, actually.
Okay.
Our final question is in the second row, please.
Hi, my name is Holly Habimana. I work for an organization that works actually in rural eastern Uganda with an NGO and a primary school there. And in addition to developing and really digging into the village that we work in, we're really trying to spearhead an initiative in the national education system in terms of moving away from that rote memorization component of primary education and into more that innovative, creative, critical thinking and analysis component of it. And I'd be interested to hear, we talk a lot about foreign direct investment, but we have to prepare the workers within Africa to, be connected to the companies so they can work and do the due diligence that is important and critical to developing the continent as a whole. And I feel like, having worked in a couple of different African countries, one of the biggest problems we have is that ability to not think for yourself and not think on your own in terms of how we're preparing our students in Africa to really have that critical analysis component.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to hear what you guys
That's a colonial legacy, which was, but now, and let's say, my only thing about education in Africa is that not everybody is going to go to university and get a PhD.
Right.
Yeah. We need to stop that. We need to tertiary schools, I want people to learn how to do carpentry. I want people to learn how to make soap.
Right.
These are immediate revenue, sort of gigs that you can get out of that middle education. Because there's no time for them to learn for 20 years to become a medical doctor.
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right.
So I think that if we can build technical schools, after they finish the high school piece, you get into technical school right away, boom, then you have the labor force that you need, the craftsmanship that you need, to repair cars and to repair. The reason why I didn't go to take global soap to Africa or to Uganda, for example, was two things. How do I test the soap every time? Because we test the soap for pathogens and get a credible answer all the time. Because if I make one mistake and somebody gets infected somehow, what is going to happen to my soap? I'm closed down. So that sort of reliability requires technical skills. So those are the things that I would advocate for in education in Africa for now.
Well, I go to one of the points that our moderator made. In America, for generations, the people who had the highest percentage of diplomas were Asian Americans. After that were Caucasian Americans, and we were somewhere rattling around there. But today, that percentage are Africans born on the continent living here. So now, do we want to go and change their educational system? Maybe that's one of the problems with getting the buy-in. Maybe they don't agree that this is the best way to go. Another point is this, rote memory. One of the reasons why the Africans have to do work by dictation is because they don't have any books. So if you're coming into and you have, I've seen schools where there are 100 pupils for one teacher, and she may be teaching 2 or 3 subjects. But give them the test. They will pass it like that. Now, I think that there has to be innovation in everything. But if you're not going in and dealing with the educational system, with the system that already exists, and making sure that they buy in, I'll tell you another thing about Africans. They won't tell you face to face that you are wrong and we're not going to do it. What they will do is let you do it for 6 years and you get frustrated and go home. Because you don't do a lot of confrontation. So one of the things, if I'm a foreign person coming into an African setting, is to make sure that they have buy-in. And if they have that, they will be supported. So the curriculum designers in Africa are just like the ones here. And it's very, very strict because it is working. The other problem is Africa education has been set up to eliminate those who cannot perform. Here is to take everybody to a GED and a whatever, no matter what. 20 years later, you're studying in this, trying to get. We have the luxury of doing that. They don't. They don't have enough jobs. They don't have enough conditions to have everybody succeed. So, for example, you're at this level. Until you pass the test, and you don't get a chance every year. You get 1 or 2 chances. If you don't pass, you have to go on and do something else to leave that space for somebody else. If you go into many countries in Africa, you have 2 shifts of school. The children go very early in the morning, they stop at noon, another shift comes. If you look at the drive for knowledge and education in Africa, go into most countries, you're going to find children under street lights doing their homework because they may not have electricity at home. There's a serious drive for education, but they don't necessarily consider ours great. I can tell you that. Well, I meet with Africans almost every week, and one of the things because I've lived there and they have confidence to a great degree, they say, "What is wrong with you all? You don't even have any geography, you don't know where anything is." And when you're in Africa, somebody will ask you, "Well, what the mayor in Wisconsin," he said, "So Wisconsin, you're living in Atlanta, and you're not even thinking about it." I'm just saying, there may not be a buy-in, and that may be what is happening.
But if you do want to work with some experts in that area, there's a gentleman who I can introduce you to who has come in and done the cultural anthropology of education and how to design, or if the design is already perfect, but how to actually get the integration of the education.
So, I'm sorry, let me be clear. We weren't going in and saying, "Oh, this is how to do this," by any means. It was actually methods created by Ugandans to develop more like a layering mechanism over the current curriculum, not to change it per se by any means.
That's what I thought.
Is a way to enhance that critical, creative, and ethical thinking. And we're working with the Ministry of Education and all sorts of Ugandan partners on the ground to ask Ugandans what they feel like they need. And this is the feedback we've gotten as all of our employees over there are Ugandan. I'm the sole American, so forgive me. So anyway.
Thank you so much for your questions
you.
and for your comments, and thank you to our speakers. I think we should give them a round of applause.
Well done.
And before Cecily provides our ending remarks, we'd like to welcome another future young leader from a local high school, it's Miss Saloni Sharma, who is here to share about her project in Tanzania. So she'll share with us for a few minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Saloni Sharma. I'm a junior at Northview High School. I would first like to thank Ms. Ford and Ms. Jenkins for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all about Project Darasani. I have 3 main things I'd like to talk about. What is Project Darasani? Why is the work that Project Darasani is doing important? And what can you do? So first, what is Project Darasani? The first question is, what does Project Darasani mean? Darasani is the Swahili word for classroom. I started Project Darasani after visiting Tanzania and seeing the condition of schools and meeting the local kids. Our focus is on education in Africa, specifically in Tanzania. We are supporting schools in the slums of Arusha, which is in the northeastern part of Tanzania. I was actually there in Tanzania earlier this month with some of my classmates, and we had the opportunity to meet some of the kids that we were supporting. Why is the work Project Darasani doing important? Well, there are some statistics. Using the per capita figures, it takes 3 months of salary to send 1 kid to school for 1 year. 80% of primary school students drop out because their parents cannot afford to send them to school or they have become orphans. Only 20% of kids have access to textbooks. And of 24 million kids in Tanzania, 13% are orphans. Those who are the poorest remain the poorest because they don't have access to that education. if they were to have access to that education, they could possibly get jobs and break free from the cycle of poverty. And that's what we're focusing on. In the last year, we have sent 16 kids to primary school and sent more than 11,000 supplies to be distributed in the schools that we're supporting. For the upcoming year, we're looking to send 33 kids to school. And since the school year starts in January, this is an immediate goal. So what can you do? By listening to this presentation, you've already kind of taken the first step. You know more about Project Darasani. We need ideas and support because it's not easy to think of all the ways that we can reach out to more people or achieve our goals. We are, by the way, a 501c3 organization. Sorry, I'm in 11th grade, this is new to me. So the kids that we are supporting are not poor because of the choices they've made. They haven't made those choices, they're 6 years old. They're poor because they happen to have been born into a poor family in a poor country. Investing in their education is perhaps the most direct way to make a difference in their lives. And that's what drives me to do what I'm doing right now. And I think everyone is here in this room because you care for people on a faraway continent and are interested in the affairs of that area. So thank you for your time. And as I say in Swahili, asante sana. Okay. If you would like more information, I have business cards with me, and we have a website also, which is project-darasani.com. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Woo. Thank you so much. We're going to close very quickly. I want to thank Derek, Nell, Bernard. Thank you so much for your great remarks. I'm always inspired when I hear Derek, and I'm always inspired when I hear about kind of learning more about social entrepreneurship and what's going wrong and what we can do better and how we can get involved. And also, thank you, Sarah, who's our co-chair programming that put this all together. Can we give her a hand? And I would like to quickly have just a few of our chairs that are here just to stand up very quickly and introduce yourselves with your first and last name. If you could all stand up very quickly. Everybody. If we could, and I think Andre is still here. If you could just introduce yourselves very quickly. Shelby, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Shelby Gilbert. I was a little late, but I'm the vice chair of the Young Leaders, and we're really excited that so many people came out tonight. I think this was a great program. We've got an exciting lineup of programs this fall, and just thrilled that you're all here. If you got questions about the World Affairs Council or how you could get involved, come up to one of us afterwards, and we'd love to get you plugged in. Thanks.
Brandy.
My name is Brandy Blue. I'm co-chair of promotions and marketing with UNICEF. So if you want your picture on the Facebook page, and try to be my friend, and make sure you follow us.
And I'm Uduak Bassi, and I work with Brandy as the marketing and PR co-chair. And if you have been tweet at us, hashtag, we want to continue this conversation. Excellent, excellent conversation tonight. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you all. And if you have questions about how to get involved, there's literature as you go out. We have a lot of exciting member-only events coming up. We're going to be holding a dialogue with the president and CEO of the Atlanta Beltline on September 17th. We're going to be having it actually in the Studioplex on the Beltline, and we're going to be having a social after. That's a member-only event, and you should come to that. It's going to be fabulous. And then also we have our Founders Day. I don't know if you all know this, but the World Affairs Council has recently gotten a new president, Ambassador Shapiro, and we'll be celebrating his presidency of the World Affairs Council on September 15th. And so we invite you to that as well. But please talk to Udi, Brandy, me, Sarah about how to get involved. And lastly, as a thank you to Derek and Nell, we have a complimentary membership to the World Affairs Council.
Oh, finally.
Yeah. So you'll be getting an email confirmation of that. So we look forward to seeing you at many of our events coming up. And last but not least, we're going to be having cocktails at Sound Table after this. Also, there's a Prince party that starts at 10:30. I'll be staying for that. And you are welcome to come to that. Sound Table is on Edgewood. Talk to us about how to get there if you don't know where Sound Table is, but we'd love to see you there as well. So, and also thank you to Africa Atlanta.
I just wanted to say,
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
AfricaAtlanta.org, we were so thrilled to partner with you
Thank
for
you.
this event, but it's a year-long series of events really highlighting Atlanta as a nexus for all things Africa. It's gone far beyond what we anticipated. We invite you to look at our website. It's a Georgia Tech initiative, so I'll look to connect with my Georgia Tech people. And that's it, AfricaAtlanta.org. You'll find out more information. If you want more information for any upcoming programs or collaborations, please contact me, Deshawn Jenkins. Thank you.
And volunteer for MedShare.
Yes, without their generous support, we couldn't have put this on thanks to CARE.
Thank you, CARE. Yes, thank you, CARE. Sorry about that. Thank you.